Welcome, my friends, to Sanctuary Online, our 39th edition of this amazing Tuesday night conversation. My name is Jo Bell, and I'm your host here tonight. And we are incredibly excited to welcome you to part two of The World's Great Religions, a teaching two-part series that was inspired by our Advent series when Ken offered a tiny little bit about what the world's great religions believed about those different themes we used in our Advent series. And so tonight is all about what those world's great religions believe. So as all those questions last week that we said, hold that, tonight's your night. Let me offer a few slides here real quickly to open up our evening. And welcome everyone. Let's see here. There we go. So once again, just make sure you have your chat box open and that you're in gallery view versus speaker view. What that means, if right now you're only seeing one person speak, then you're in something called speaker view. If you go up to the top right of your screen and hit that, click it and choose gallery view, then what you can do is you can see all the different faces and stay in relationship with us. We talked the text feature. Again, if we have your cell phone number, we'll go ahead and put that in and we'll give you a quick little text on Tuesday afternoons. And now a button update. Woohoo! So you might get these each week, depending on how cute this little goatee is. But my goodness, when Zoe, who is a friend of Sanctuary and been a part of us in many ways, Zoe loves to come over and hug the goats and help with them. And this picture on the right-hand side, when I saw that, I just looked like Button was smiling up at us. And I'm thinking that picture has to be shown around the world. So there you go. Button's healthy and happy, Ken. She's doing well.
Doing well.
Fabulous. Fabulous.
No, I don't know if I'm finished.
Oh, I'm going to mute you out there. So February, once again, last week was how the world's great religions began. If for some reason you weren't with us or didn't get that email, give us a holler at talktous@sanctuaryinthewoods.com, and we'll get that deck of fabulous and informative slides out to you. Tonight is part two, and next week we want to invite you back. We have a fabulous panel. It's not gonna be your mother's Black History Month, okay? We're going after some things that we learned when we had our panel from Kwanzaa on December 31st. And we learned so many particulars of the African-American history that we just weren't aware of. And so we're pulling out some fabulous stories direct from those amazing sources. So that, and then February book club. Cheryl, you said you finished our book this week? And you need to be on.
Yes, I finished it.
And are you saying people, how long? They've got one more week to read, right? 2 more weeks to read.
2 more weeks to read. It's very fun. It's a very fun book and an easy read. So
as compared to last month.
Yes, as compared to last month, it's not nearly as dramatic as last month.
And we're going to do a real quick advertisement. I know many of you know that you're going to spend Lent with us in March. And we are going to do an epic maneuver, and we're going to give you each a taste of creating a life that matters. Very often we would do the second course, which is called Rediscovering Myself, during Lent. It's a great time for reflection. And I know many of the churches have been reaching out to me for these dates and for some descriptions. Some of the networks have been putting out the schedule as advertising. So we want you to bring a friend. This is the first time CLM doesn't have to be restricted to be in a building with a good sized body of people and a certified facilitator. We have guest facilitators for each week. So we're really, really excited to bring this to you. So mark your calendars for all 5 Tuesday nights in March. And also we're hoping that folks come and do the entire curriculum. So come starting the first week. And we're going to actually give you homework between week 1 and week 2 and week 3, week 3 and week 4, and really test out how does it look to put CLM online. And hopefully this fall or next winter, put the entire curriculum there with a lot of your help. So that is all of the advertising tonight. Barb, I'm going to send it over to you, my friend. You're on mute. Yeah. There you go.
There we go. Okay. I've been having trouble with my video and audio freezing up here tonight. So if I cut out in the middle, I'll apologize, and I will race through this to hopefully get it in. So we've been looking at HBCUs for February as our spotlight. And HBCUs, if you missed last week, are historically Black colleges and universities. And we're going to take a look tonight at Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. And I like the school motto, et facta est lux in Latin, and there was light. They were founded in 1867. HBCUs generally are founded sometime between the end of the Civil War in the US and when the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964. So they were founded in 1867 in Augusta, Georgia as the Augusta Institute, moving to Atlanta in 1879 and renamed for the final time in 1913 in honor of Henry Lyman Morehouse, who was the corresponding secretary of the American Baptist Home Mission. And like some colleges, they have their roots in the Baptist tradition. The Morehouse School of Medicine was established in 1975. They are a private, not-for-profit institution with about 2,200 students. Academically, Morehouse is very, very well known. They are one of only 2 HBCUs to have produced Rhodes Scholars, and they are the #1 feeder school for Black men entering Ivy League graduate programs. So academically, very, very strong at Morehouse. Joe, go ahead to the next page, please. Their mission is to develop men, and they since they are a men's college, they specifically say men, with disciplined minds who will lead lives of leadership and service, who will pursue truth, morality, and justice with the same passion and conviction as the students who came before. Graduates across a wide range of disciplines. 2 of the best known, still connected with Georgia, Martin Luther King Jr. from the class of 1948, a civil rights leader, pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church, and Nobel Peace Prize laureate. And the current pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church is a man by the name of Reverend Raphael Warnock, class of 1991, who in about a month ago was elected as the US Senator, one of the 2 US Senators from Georgia in the special runoff election. Go ahead, Joe. Just a few more folks who are prominent graduates with the class there, and some of the things that they have accomplished and contributed to our collective life as a nation. Mordecai Johnson in the class of 1911 was the first African-American president of Howard University, another HBCU. Julian Bond was a chairman of the NAACP and a civil rights leader. Louis Sullivan was the former US Secretary of Health and Human Services, physician and President Emeritus currently of Morehouse. Maynard Jackson was the first mayor of Atlanta. It's okay. Herman Cain, you may remember that name if you're a follower of US politics. He was a Republican presidential candidate in 2012. He was the guy with the 999 plan. Samuel L. Jackson, if you're a fan of the actor. Edwin Moses, if you're an Olympics fan, who was a gold medalist. Jay Johnson, US Secretary of Homeland Security under President Barack Obama, and Spike Lee, film director and producer. All are notable graduates of Morehouse, and many, many, many more, but I wanted to give Ken just a few minutes to talk tonight, so we'll wrap it up there, and we will continue with our focus on other institutions in the coming weeks.
Thanks, Barb. And Ken, it is all yours tonight, my friend.
Okay, thank you,
know what?
Joe.
And before you start, Barb, or before you start, Ken, just a reminder to folks, I'm sure questions will come up or even comments that you want to make while Ken's sharing. And what we're going to do is after each group of religions, we'll take a pause, and Cheryl and Barb and I will take a look at any comments you've made in the chat, and we'll open up for some back and forth conversation. Okay, so we'll do that all the way through the night. So please, if you have a question, feel free to pop it over in the chat room, and that way that helps us kind of manage the conversation during Ken's presentation. Helpful, Ken?
Helpful. Okay, thank you, and thanks everybody for being here. As we mentioned last week, there are very few experiences that unite all of humankind. There are very few things in common with all of the peoples that we know anything about from the beginning of time, but religion is one of those things. We also know that down through the ages, religion misused has been responsible for incalculable human suffering, and that most often that has been either out of just plain ignorance about what other people believe or misunderstanding about their motives. And today, more than ever, we know that any hope for peace in the world depends upon a mutual respect and understanding of everyone who is different from us in any way. And that one of the ways we can strive for that peace is by trying to understand the different belief systems by which the peoples of the world live their lives and the ways in which we practice our religious beliefs. So last week we looked at 10 great religions in terms of the way they began, and tonight we're going to look at the exact same 10 in terms of what they believe. And as Joe said, after each grouping, we'll be pausing for a few minutes to see if you have any questions or comments. And then we're going to, I'm really going to move pretty quickly through these, because at the end I want to talk about what the great religions have in common, ways in which they are similar, and the major ways in which they are different. And then that I'll have some time for us to discuss those things, because in a way that will be a summary of everything we've covered both last week and this week. And so as we begin, I want to point out just a few things. The first thing is that in each of these religions, we're going to be reducing a very complicated system down to really the most concise core of its beliefs. And in the interest of time, in each of the religions, I'm going to be searching for what I call the great insight. What is it about this religion that makes it most different from all of the other religions? Also, I want to point out that the beliefs I'm going to be talking about with each of these religions is orthodoxy. And what that means is that these are the beliefs that conform most generally to what tradition says these religions believed at the very beginning. We know that every great religion has gone through reformations, it has split into sects. And so, for example, today, all the people who call themselves Hindus don't believe the same thing exactly any more than everybody who calls themselves a Christian believes the same things. So with that in mind, we're going to start with the religions of India. First of all, with Hinduism, which, as we saw last week, is the oldest of all of the living religions. It's known as the religion of many who are one. The reason for that is that even though Hinduism believes in one great universal spirit, the Brahman, they also believe that that spirit is manifest with many different faces and many different ways. There are actually more than 36 million gods and goddesses that have been identified down through the ages within the construct of Hinduism. Hinduism believes that history will never end, but it cycles, it changes in cycles. And so there is the doctrine of the Trimurti, or the idea that Brahman is the part of God that creates. Vishnu is the part of God that preserves the creation, and then Shiva is the part of God that destroys it. So in each cycle, there is a creation by Brahma, then Vishnu preserves that until Shiva destroys it, and then Brahma creates again. And there are millions and millions and millions of these cycles of time. Hinduism believes that each person has both a temporary body and an immortal soul. And this is the great insight of Hinduism. Every Hindu says these words in Sanskrit, Tat Tuam Asi, and that translates to I am that. Hinduism was the first major religion where individual human beings said, whatever is eternal, whatever is out there, I am part of it and it is part of me in some way. And so Hindus believe that the physical body is temporary and it is ruled by passion, but the soul is eternal. And the soul is ruled by serenity and a desire to escape rebirth. Hinduism believes in the caste system. We know that that for a number of years, decades now, Hinduism has been trying to ameliorate the influence of this, but that in fact it still is in many ways still enforced in India. It's a very cruel system that literally relegates people to stations in life beyond which many of them, particularly in the lower parts of the caste system, are unable to ever extricate themselves. Hinduism believes in karma, which is the idea that every deed and action we commit is either good or evil, and it is compensated in that way. Hinduism believes in reincarnation until samsara, or until the soul is able to free itself and move into nirvana, which is the highest state a soul can ever elevate itself to. And that is the state from which it never has to come back and be reborn again. The last two things here are the yogas and the dharma, and they really kind of go together. The yogas are the disciplines that enable a person to learn how to control the body and its emotions. It's like a path. Each person has to find their path. And within Hinduism, there are literally hundreds of yogas, hundreds of different ways. Some people do this by charity. Some people do this by meditation. Some people do this. Sex is one of the yogas in Hinduism. You may be familiar with the Kama Sutra, Vajrayana, which is one of the holy books of Hinduism, which is all about erotica. That explains that particular yoga. The Dharma is the moral order. Each one of the yogas has a dharma. It has a moral order which the person has to live up to in order to make it to samsara. And so the yoga is like a path, and the dharma is like the behaviors that you have to keep on that path. So then let's move to the second of the Hindu religion, of the religions of India, which is Buddhism. Buddhism is known as the religion of the enlightened one. Remember last week we learned that Siddhartha Gautama sat down under the Bodhi tree and said he wouldn't get up until he understood how to escape. And he stood up and said, I got it, I know what it is. And he started preaching and teaching, and that was the beginning of Buddhism. Well, this is what he said it was. He said, the first law of life, the law of enlightenment is this: from good must come good, and from evil must come evil. Now, that was just another way of talking about karma. If you do something good, you will be rewarded. If you do something bad, you will be punished. So always try to do something good. That was really as simple as it was in the beginning. But then Buddha said, he was against the caste system. He said, people are either good or evil, and that's the only way you can divide people. He did not believe in a personal God. We've talked about the fact that Buddhism really started more as a philosophy, and then through the ages, it has transformed itself and reformed itself until today it is literally practiced as a religion. Buddha said there is a futility to prayer and sacrifice. Don't waste your time with prayers, and don't waste your time with sacrifices. Of course, that has changed because many Buddhists today both pray and make sacrifices. Buddha said that the aim of life is to end the end of individual existence. In other words, the way you escape having to come back and be reborn again is that you always do good, because from good must come good, and from evil must come evil. Now, here is probably the great insight, one of the great insights of Buddhism. The karma of reincarnation that Hinduism believed in was that you are born the first time as a human being, and then through your karma, you will either progress to a higher state of being a human, or you will move backwards into a lower state of being a human. Buddha had a different interpretation of reincarnation, which we now call transmigration. And here's the difference. According to Buddha, a human being can be reincarnated as an animal, or a human being can be reincarnated even as an inanimate object like a rock. And so that's a great difference between Hinduism and Buddhism. But the object, of course, is to free oneself to become enlightened, to reach nirvana, which is the state of never having to be reborn again. And that enlightenment, he said, comes through, this is very important, what he called the middle path of moderation. Buddha said there is an extreme on both sides, but the way to enlightenment is down the middle. It is a middle path of moderation. And the way you get there is through observing the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. The Four Noble Truths being realizing that life is suffering. Suffering is caused by gratification of desires. Suffering is cured by restraining your desires, and knowing this prepares you for the final truth. The Eightfold Path are right views, right intent, right speech, right conduct, right means of livelihood, right mindfulness, right endeavors, and right meditation. So people who say, I can be a Christian and a Buddhist, are people who are talking about this part of Buddhism. The fact that we should live by the Eightfold Path. Other than that, there are significant differences, which we'll talk about just a little bit later. When we talk about Buddhism, though, changing from a philosophy to a religion, that resulted not exclusively, but in part as Buddhism moved from India into the rest of Southeast Asia and then into the Far East, and resulted in Buddhism having like two major sects. If you go to Southeast Asia, like I lived in Thailand, every representation of Buddha in Thailand is a very thin, ascetic face, absolutely no emotion, like the Buddha sitting behind me right now. Buddha can only be portrayed in three ways: sitting or standing with one hand raised, or reclining, always ascetic, always thin. The farther you move east, for example, by the time you get to Japan, what does Buddha look like in Japan? He's big and fat, and he's laughing, and you rub his tummy for good luck. That's Mahayana Buddhism. The Buddhism of Southeast Asia and India is still conservative, strict, ascetic. The farther you move east, the more liberal, the more open, the bigger Buddhism comes. And there's a fascinating story that I learned when I was living in Thailand about that movement of Buddhism east. This is a statue of Kuan Yin. Kuan Yin in Buddhist tradition is the missionary, the first missionary to take Buddhism from India over into Southeast Asia and then into the Far East. And here's this is a Japanese representation of Kuan Yin, because the tradition is that when Kuan Yin left India, he was male. By the time he reached Japan, she was female. The Kuan Yin literally changed from male to female in moving Buddhism from its origins in India into Southeast Asia and then farther over into the Far East. So let's move on to the next religion of India, which is Jainism. which is called the religion of Mahavira, the conqueror. We talked last week about the similarities between it and Buddhism. They're similar in their belief in karma, in transmigration as opposed to reincarnation. Also in their belief that the caste system was evil and should be done away with. Also in the belief in the futility of prayers and sacrifices. But here is the great insight of Jainism. You remember Mahavira went away and came back and said, I've discovered the path. For Mahavira, the path was not the path of moderation that Buddha chose, but it was a path of extremism, of extreme asceticism, which, as we learned last week, is called ahimsa, or the reverence for all of life. And we talked about the fact that the Jain priests even today walk around totally naked, wearing masks so they won't inhale insects, sweeping a path in front of them with a straw broom. So the great insight of Jainism that distinguishes it from Hinduism and Buddhism is that it is not about moderation, it is about an extreme form of asceticism. By the way, some people asked last week about the swastika on the symbolism for Jainism. I did some research on that this week, and I found first of all, one story that talked about the swastika first appearing 7,000 years ago in what is now Ukraine. I found another article that said the swastika first appeared 12,000 years ago in India, what is now India. And I found a third one that said it appeared 10,000 years ago in Asia. So basically what we can learn from all of that is that it's ancient. It appeared in different parts of the world at the same time. In some places, it is symbolic. Among Native American peoples, it was more just a decoration. It didn't stand for anything. You know, there's a form of archaeology called ancient symbology where they study ancient symbols. And what symbologists agree on is that until the Nazis used the swastika as a symbol, as their symbol, it was always used in a positive way. Around the world for millennia, before the Nazis used it, it stood for light, it stood for hope, it stood for peace. And so it was a positive symbol until the Nazis used it. The final religion from India that we're going to talk about is Zoroastrianism, which, as we learned last week, actually originated in ancient Persia. Zoroastrianism is a monotheistic religion. With monotheism means belief in one God. But here, remember when Zoroaster went away and came back and said, I've discovered the truth and here is the truth. Here's what he said the truth was. Don't attribute evil to God. And what he meant by that was that up until that time, everything that happened was attributed to God. And what he did was he gave God a name. He called God Ahura Mazda. And then he said, but there is evil. And he called evil, first of all, Druj. And then through the years, he developed evil into a personality, a person, and he called that person Angramayu. Now, it's easy for us to think that people move from polytheism, in other words, you believe in a bunch of gods until you believe in just one God. Actually, there are several steps there. What happens is that people believe in a bunch of gods until the next thing they believe in is called henotheism. Henotheism means I believe that there are a lot of gods. I just believe my God's better. My God's stronger. My God will destroy all of the other gods. Our ancient Hebrew ancestors were henotheists for a long time. Remember the battle between Yahweh and Baal on the two mountaintops in the Old Testament? They didn't say Baal wasn't real. They just said, our God is going to be able to defeat your God. And so that's henotheism. That's the second step. From there, people move to radical monotheism, where you believe in one God, but you attribute everything to God. And our Hebrew ancestors were there for a while. There are places in the Old Testament where horrible things are attributed to God, that God does terrible things. That's during that period where everything, whether it was good or bad, they said God did it because there's only one God. But then you move to pure monotheism, which is the idea that God is all good and so God can only do good. And that's where the dualism began to enter into Western religions, Judaism, then Christianity, and then Islam. The idea of, for example, in the Old Testament, Satan is only mentioned 3 times, and is a very ambiguous kind of figure who obviously works for God. God tells Satan what to do in the Old Testament. But then in that 500-year period we call the interbiblical period, intertestamental period between the Old Testament and the New Testament, a lot of things happen so that by the time we enter into the New Testament, you got a devil. You got a very clear person called Satan who opposes God. And so the idea of separating evil out of God is what Zoroastrianism did for the first time. And it's important not because it's a big religion, because it's not now, but because of this remarkable influence that it had on all of these other religions. Okay, that's a brief summary of what the religions of India believe. Let's pause for a second here, Joby, and see if anybody's got a question or a comment.
They do, Ken. Let me pop a few of those over. I want to make sure though, when you had the statue up, I put you on something called Spotlight. And so my friends, it may have pushed you out of gallery view, and so that you're actually only seeing Ken right now or only seeing me. So again, make sure that you go up to the top right of your screen and hit view. And if you click on that, you can choose gallery view and then see all the people again, which is better for our conversation, right? There you go.
Okay.
So Ken, a couple of comments. There were definitely some rock comments about about being able to be reincarnated as an inanimate object. So that was a little conversation sidebar. And then there was a question, Kristen, I think you've got at least one, then Glenda, regarding male to female and maternal society. So I'll let you talk with Ken directly.
Yeah, hi Ken. Always interesting as usual. Okay, that statue. First of all, I didn't type this, but what are they? It's not a saint. Is that what a messenger? What do they call that? Would you say she is?
She is called a missionary.
She was a missionary.
Okay. Yeah, yes, we would use the word missionary. In that time, she was just acknowledged as she's kind of the St. Paul of Buddhism. You know, Paul was like the first great Christian missionary. Kuan Yin is the first great Buddhist missionary in tradition. The tradition is that she was the first one to leave India and spread Buddhism.
And do we think that the change from male to female, do they attribute that to Asia having like perhaps a more maternal society than India did?
It's really hard to know exactly, and it's probably more tradition, than anything else, a story. But remember, religious stories we talked about are answer stories. They're meant to answer a question, and so in all probability, the fact that Kuan Yin changed from a man to a woman is a story aimed at answering the question, why is Buddhism in India and Southeast Asia different from Buddhism in the Far East? It feels more feminine in the Far East. It feels more male in India, and just in terms of the attributes that are attributed to the genders, and that probably accounts for it.
Thank you.
You good with that, Kristen? You all set? Okay, Glenda, you had a question here for Ken. If you want to go ahead and unmute and.
Yeah, I did. Hi, Ken. As you talk about all of the religions and you go back so many hundreds of centuries, my question was, is there any indicator where female leaders became possible in each of the different religious sects? And was there a common time when that actually happened? Or in fact, was it always the case? Or in fact, has it even happened so far with them all?
Yeah, very good question. Matriarchies and religion is a fascinating study all by itself. We have some evidence that there have been religious centers that were matriarchal. In other words, they are run by women. Most of them are pre-literate. So we have evidence in statuary and in other artifacts of this. When I was in the Philippines for a long time, and for example, the original religion of the Philippines is called Babayan, and in Babayan, it was a totally matriarchal religion. The deity was female. All priests were female. Men were allowed to become priests only if they assumed a female identity in every way. And so we have evidence of some matriarchy, some matriarchal centers where religion was determined by women and controlled by women. Unfortunately, they're all pre-literate, and so we don't have any written records of them, but we do have archaeological evidence of them.
Thanks, Ken. That's good for you, Glenda? All right.
I have another one that was from last week. If it's about the whole thing of Jainism, isn't that the religion where they go around naked because they don't want to hurt anything?
Yes. Yes, that's the extreme ahimsa that we were talking about, where Mahavira said, you know, it's not, salvation doesn't come by the middle road, it comes by the extreme of ahimsa, of reverence for all of life.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good, Cheryl. All right,
Yep.
Ken, let's move on to the religions of China. I'm going to keep you going a little bit because I know last week
Yeah.
we went about
I'm gonna
90
try.
minutes and there was great
Yeah.
conversation and we made some nice slides at the end for that. So I'm going to head you all the way
Yeah, I'm going to
across
try to move a little.
to China.
I'm going to try to move a little bit faster here. So
You're
the greatest religion of China, the oldest religion of China is Confucianism. It is known as the religion of a great sage. The beliefs of Confucianism include veneration of ancestors, which is the idea that our dead ancestors can still influence our lives today in positive or negative ways. What Confucius was most concerned about was right relationships between people in every kind of relationship, rulers and subjects, parents and children, etc. And he believed that harmony in the universe came through the balance of yin and yang. Here is the great insight of Confucianism. It is yin and yang. It is the idea that that the entire universe is governed by two principles which both oppose each other and complement each other at the same time, yin and yang, and that harmony in any situation in the universe, relationships between nations, in all harmony depends upon the correct balance of yin and yang. For example, yin is negative, yang is positive. Night is yin, day is yang, passive is yin, active is yang, moon is yin, sun is yang, female is yin, male is yang, intuitive is yin, logical is yang, cold is yin, hot is yang, soft is yin, hard is yang. So you see all of those different polarities have to be in balance, and that brings harmony into the universe, and that is the primary teaching of the great insight of Confucius and Confucianism. The second religion we're going to talk about from China is Taoism. It's called the religion that cannot be understood, and last week we talked about why, or it is called the religion of the way. And the great insight of Taoism is that there is a Tao, there is a harmony in the universe, and that that individual happiness comes from being in harmony with the Tao, the way, the energy that flows through all of life. And that if you resist that, which means operating in immoral ways, illegal ways, hurtful, harmful ways, if you resist the Tao, then that's produces the conflict within the soul. Now we're going to move to the one indigenous religion of Japan, which is Shinto. Shinto is known as the religion of the ways of the god. Shinto is, as we said last week, is also pre-literate. It is so ancient that we don't know when it began. We just know that it began as a nature worshiping religion, and that nature worship even continues as part of Shinto today in a way that it doesn't in any other religion. Now, I want to introduce you to two big words here because they're really important. The first one is pantheism. Pantheism is the idea that this physical world is God, that divinity and the world are the same thing exactly. The world is God and is all there is of God, that the life, the sacred spirit of God lives in this physical world. Panentheism is the idea that all of that is true, but that's not all there is to God. Panentheism says, yes, the world is sacred. The world is the life of God. Everything in this world is part of God, but that God also transcends time and space and is much, much bigger than just this world. I, for example, consider myself a Christian panentheist because I believe in the sacredness of this physical world, even as a Christian. And within Shinto, that became a very important part of their belief, moving away from just being pantheist to being panentheist. They believe in veneration of the ancestors, the divine origin of the Mikado or their emperor, their leader, as we talked about last week, the great sins that come from the very beginning of Shinto are theft, lying, adultery, incest, bestiality, and witchcraft. And the great virtues are courage, loyalty, and cleanliness. It's hard to find the great insight of Shinto because there's been so much Buddhist and Confucian influence, but probably it is that what we showed last week, that Shinto is the simplest of all of the great religions. It began with no temples, no priesthood, no magical writings, no sacred spaces. It just began with a love and appreciation and veneration of nature and ancestors. So those are the religions of China. We can pause and see if anybody's got any questions or comments.
Kristen, you're like, I could talk to Ken for a week. And I'm not sure that means you have another question about these three, or if we'd like to move along. And the only reason I'm pushing to move along a little bit, we have some really neat, purpose of religion, right? Slides at the end that might bring some more conversation out. Anybody at all for those last three? Going once, going twice. Ken, we are on to the religions of the West.
Okay, good. Okay, let's begin with Judaism, which is known as the religion of one God. This is the great insight of Judaism, monotheism, pure monotheism. It is embodied in what Jews call the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one, the Lord is one. That is the Shema of Judaism, and it is the great insight of Judaism. Judaism also believes that God is active in and gives purpose to human life and human history. I'm gonna two more big words. Okay, the first one is anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism means when we attribute human attributes to God. If we talk about God walking around, if we talk about the hands of God, we talk about the eyes of God. Judaism does that. It believes that God is that much a part of human history and human purpose. The other word is anthropocentrism, and that's when we attribute divine attributes to people. But Jewish people believe that God is active in and gives purpose to all of human history. Jews believe in individual judgment, that each person has a mortal body and an immortal soul. Listen carefully to this. Jews believe that each person is born innocent and can remain innocent by choosing to be good. Now remember that when we get over to Christianity. They believe that all of creation is good because it is given from the what? Hand of God. There's the anthropomorphism again. And that the 10 Commandments are given by God to guide human conduct. The second of the religions of the West is Christianity. As we've learned, Christianity literally grew out of Judaism. that Judaism is the parent of Christianity. And so Christianity inherited the monotheism, the belief in one God. But then the doctrine of Christianity also includes the Trinity, the idea that God is made known to us in three different ways: as the creator, as the redeemer, and as the comforter. God creates, God through Jesus redeems, and God through the Holy Spirit comforts and sustains. The great insight of Christianity is that Jesus is the Christ, that Jesus is the promised Messiah, that he is the anointed one. Just like the Jews have the Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one, the Lord is one. In early Christianity, there was a confession. In Greek, it was Jesus Christos Theou Soter, which means Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. Later, when Christians encountered the Roman Empire, it got shortened to Christos Kyrios, Christ is Lord. That is the great insight of Christianity. Now, Christians also believe in individual judgment, but Orthodox Christianity teaches that judgment will result in either eternal punishment or eternal reward, because each person is not born innocent, but each person is born in sin and in need of salvation because of the disobedience of Adam and Eve, and what Christian theology calls the fall from innocence. And Christianity teaches that the birth, life, and death of Jesus provides that salvation, and that to be Christian means living by the ethical teachings of Jesus. The last of our religions, the third from religion of the West, is Islam, which is called the religion of submission to Allah. Islam also believes in one God. It is monotheistic. Here's the great insight of Islam. As we learned last week, it is the Shahada. La ilaha illa Allah, Muhammad Rasul Allah. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is God's prophet. They believe in eternal life, and that it is our conduct in this world that determines our destiny after death. And Muslims are taught to live rigidly and very carefully and literally by the 5 pillars, which are kalima, or monotheism, that belief in God. There's one God and Muhammad is God's prophet. Salat, which is praying 5 times a day facing Mecca. Zakat, which is charity or generosity toward the poor. The Hajj, which is the pilgrimage to Mecca. Remember last week we talked about walking around and around the Kaaba in Mecca. Every Muslim who is able is expected to make that pilgrimage at least once in their life, and fasting, especially during the month of Ramadan. So those are the 3 religions of the West. Joe?
Thank you, Ken. No one has any questions in the chat box. I don't know if anybody wants to do this interesting thing like raising your hand. If you have something, Janice, there you go. Please go ahead and unmute and talk with Ken.
I have a question about sex and each of the religions, because none of the others seem to have any hang up on sex, but Christianity does. Oh, well, Islam does. But
Yes. Yeah. That's a huge thing.
Huge question. We're gonna do a night on sex,
Thank
Janice.
you, Jan.
you're welcome.
Let me do a plug here.
Yes.
Janice, we speak about sex during CLM next month in March, so don't miss
Yes,
that one.
Okay.
Yes, I'm going to be teaching a class in March called Keeping Body and Soul Together.
Yep.
And we're going to talk exactly about what you're talking about
Okay.
at that point. So thank
Excellent.
you for that question. Yeah.
But is there anything, Ken, that jumps out at you when someone asks you where does that come from in Christianity, or where does that come from in Islam, if the other great religions didn't have that as part of their story or their concern?
Yes, we know exactly where it came from. It does not come from our Jewish roots. It does not come from the teachings of Jesus. It comes from when Christianity encountered the Hellenistic Greek world in the 3rd century. We can trace it back to the moment that that Christians became suspicious of sex and fearful of sex and thinking that there was something dirty and awful about sex. So we'll talk about that exactly. We know exactly when it started and where it came from, but it did not come from our Jewish roots, and it did not come from the teachings of Jesus.
Ken, I wonder if you could speak. Unless somebody else has one, I do have a question here in this piece around when you say that the Judaism story is that we start out good, and how can Christianity, who comes from the roots of Judaism, go all the way to the other end and say we start out evil?
Yeah. That's the question that Jews ask us all the time. Jews say, where do you get this idea? Because you say you get it from our scriptures, but we can't find it. We can't find where God said, created everything and said, this is good. This is good. And Jews say, we can't find a place where God ever changed her mind and said, no, it's not good. And so the whole Christian theology of the fall and that people are born in sin and so forth, that is Orthodox Christianity. That is the way Christianity began. But if we ever do, like we do Tuesday night just on Christianity and what it believes, there are many other ways to understand the life and death of Jesus. Other than that's called substitutionary atonement. That idea, I'm born evil, and literally, I'm so bad that God had to kill Jesus to save me. That's substitutionary atonement, but that's not the only way to understand, the birth and life and death and teachings of Jesus. So your question is huge again, Joe. It is that Christian theology says because Adam and Eve sinned, we're all born sinful and deserving of hell. That's what the early Christian councils said. Every baby. That's why when Catholicism believes that if a mother is having difficulty birthing a child and the child may die in the womb, a priest can baptize the child in the womb in order to save it, because if it's born dead, then it goes to purgatory. So there's all Christianity built up this huge thing around this. And Christians today, finally, thankfully, are beginning to question this and look again at what the birth and life and death and teachings of Jesus might mean for us.
Yeah. Thank you, Ken. Barb is having some computer issues. Gene, I've got your hand up there. Go for it, my friend.
It's just interesting that, again, I was raised, and I am Catholic, that the unbaptized babies went to limbo.
Yeah, limbo, right.
And then, a couple of years ago, the Pope says that limbo does not exist. So where are all those babies?
Yes. Yes.
Again, everything.
Yeah. Where are all those?
Yeah. Anyway.
Good thing God knows.
Religion, one of the reasons that these 10 religions have survived is that they have all been open to evolving. Some religions that refused, we know exactly about some religions that refused to change and they died. Change is not an option. Change is a part of life. It is the sign that you are living. If you stop changing, you stop living. And all of these religions are evolving, and Christianity is unquestionably in a period of real ferment and change right now. And this Pope is helping that happen in the Roman Catholic Church.
All right. Well, Barb had asked a question around how long ago did Judaism move to monotheism?
Well, that's hard to know, because it is possible to date these things in the 2nd and 3rd centuries BC. We're really not certain. In other words, if you read the Old Testament as one document through composed, what you will see is a beginning of polytheism, and then of henotheism, and then of radical monotheism, and then a pure monotheism. I think it's very hard to date it. It's very hard to date.
All right. Well, why don't we pop back out? Ken, I know you've got some good question slides. I'm gonna pop through the question slides and let you quickly grasp them so you can hold your question. So let me see if I can do that properly. So the first one is around religion, attempting to answer the what and the why questions.
Yes, I'll do this very briefly. Just remember, we talked last week about the storyteller in religion is the person who has the answer stories. And these are the questions that religion tries to answer. Why is there something instead of nothing? A number of years ago, a group of Jewish scholars were asked to come up with the most profound question that humankind can ask. And they studied literally for years and then came back and they said, this is the most profound question. Why is there something instead of nothing? Because there doesn't have to be something. And they said, if you answer that, then you will answer all these other questions that come along behind it there, which can be summed up this way. Where did I come from? Why am I here? And where am I going when this is all over? And that's all summed up in those other, these are the answer questions, the questions that religion tries to answer.
Yeah, profound.
So you can move now, Joby.
Yep. Where most religions are similar.
We want to spend a couple of minutes on this one, where the religions tend to be most similar. They tend to be most similar, of course, in their belief in a higher power, but in all the great religions, this higher power is also the source of human life, and therefore is to be adored or venerated or worshiped, because that power is where we came from. They're alike in having sacred writings. Usually the writings of these religions include history and poetry, some hymns, some prayers, some rules for how you worship, but they all have in common a set of sacred writings. They are similar in having holy places. All the religions have some sites to which people make pilgrimages. Usually the birthplace of the founder is a holy place. Where important events in the history of that religion happened can also be a holy place. They are similar in having people set apart as uniquely important. These can be the founders of the religion. Quite often they are prophets. Quite often they are missionaries, like St. Paul and Kuan Yin. And sometimes they're even set apart to be worshipped themselves and venerated as in sainthood within Catholicism. They are alike in having a set of visual symbols, a symbol so that when people see the symbol, they associate it with the religion. And in many cases, that symbol also identifies what the heart of that religion, actually is, like the cross within Christianity. And by the way, we're thinking about doing one of these Tuesday evening conversations down the road on religious symbolism, all of the religious symbols of the religious world, because that's another fascinating thing that we could explore together. They're similar in having sacred spaces. Marseille Eliade once said, true transformation only happens in sacred space. In other words, real spiritual change happens in spaces that are dedicated to spiritual change. And so all the world's religions have space that's dedicated, and all of them have something like an altar, something that focuses the reality and presence of the divinity in that space. And finally, they're alike in having liturgical celebrations. All the great religions have holy days, other days that are observed for special reasons, and have ritual ways of worshiping on all of these individual days. So those are the ways in which most of these living religions are similar. This week, Jean sent us, I think this is the next slide, isn't it, Joe? The golden rule.
Yes.
Yes. One of the most fascinating things is that every religion has a different version of the golden rule. The interesting thing, I think, is that Jesus framed it most positively. Most of them say in some way, don't do to other people what you don't want them to do to you. Jesus said, do to other people what you do want them to do to you. But this is one of the places in which every one of the religions has some form of this idea that as a human, just because you are a human being, you should treat other people in the ways that you would want them to treat you. So thank you for that, Jean.
Jean,
So
you,
I think we'll move on to, yeah,
well,
go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, Jean, you reminded Cheryl and I, it was a great memory because we had spoken about this when we saw your email, and I'm like, hold on, we have a picture like that as well. And that the golden rule there is hanging Sandra Miller in the MCC Toronto chapel, right? It's the one thing. There's candles and candles and candles and candles for lighting, and then there's the golden rule that's right up on the wall. So thanks for that reminder, Jean, that how important it is, and how again, how in our diversity we can find so much similarity, right?
Yes, yes.
Any
So
comments yet?
the
Questions
last
or
thing,
comments? Oh, here we go. Gene's saying in the chat there, Ken, that you can get the copy
Yeah.
of this golden rule just by simply Googling images of the golden rule.
yeah. And there are a number of different ones. This is the most extensive. It
Yeah.
includes more religions than the others that are there, but there are a number of different ones that point this out, that there is this similarity among all of the religions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ken.
Okay, we just talked about the ways in which the great religions are similar. Now let's talk about how they are different, and then spend the rest of our time with any kind of discussion that anybody might want to have questions or comments. These are the primary ways in which the great religions differ from each other. They differ first of all in their idea of sin and evil. Some religions believe that human beings are born intrinsically sinful and they must be saved. They must be redeemed in some way. Other religions believe that individuals are intrinsically good and have the choice to do good or to do evil, and their choices determine their fate. And then some other religions believe that human beings are just a part of nature, and so therefore human beings aren't any more good or evil than a tree. Human beings are morally neutral and just a part of the creation. The second way in which the religions differ is in their idea of salvation. Some religions are messianic in that they believe one person is responsible for being able to save or redeem all of the people who are born sinful and in need of salvation. Some believe that salvation, in other words, your fate after death depends upon the quality of your life. What do you do during your life? And at the end of your life, that in some way is calculated and depends upon, and that is what your fate depends upon. And some religions believe that God is so remote that God doesn't care what you do, that God is not involved with human beings in a personal way, like sin and evil and redemption, salvation, and so forth would imply. The third way in which religions differ from each other is in their idea of priesthood. Some religions believe that there is a select group of people who literally stand between us and God. They are intercessors between us and God, that they have the power to influence God on our behalf. Others believe that there is a select group of people within the religious community that the religious community itself calls out and anoints to represent God within the community. And others believe that faith and worship are such private things that they only involve the individual and God. They do not involve the agency of any other person in any capacity. The next way in which they differ is in their idea of the purpose and value of individual human life. Some religions believe that every person, by virtue of being born, has as a part of them the imago Dei, the image of God, that the image of God is in every single person. And just because of that, there is a sacredness to every single individual human life. Some others believe that it is being an individual, it is the ego that is the source of all suffering. And so the idea of religion is to help people escape being an individual and having an ego, because that is the source of all suffering. And so the ego and individuality must literally be obliterated. And finally, there is a difference in the idea of the nature of God. Some religions believe that God is immanent. That means God is close to us, that God can be contacted, that God can be experienced personally, that God can be persuaded to do certain things or not do certain things. Other religions believe that God is transcendent, that God is far away somewhere, that God cannot be experienced by the or known in any way by human beings, that God is beyond experience and knowledge. So those are the primary ways in which the great religions differ from each other. And here is just a little summary. Let me add to that before we talk about these things. We talked about those religions of India. They have been characterized as life denying, as introspective, and as pessimistic. And then we talked about the religions of China and Japan. They have been described as philosophical and ethical and esoteric, hard to understand. And then there are the religions of the West, and they have been characterized as life affirming, as justice oriented, and as optimistic in nature. I don't mean any judgment by any of those words. It's just that those are the ways that people historically, philosophers of religion, sociologists of religion, view the just from an empirical point of view. This is what these religions, this is the way they can be characterized.
So thoughts and comments, my friends. Barb is asking who characterized them this way. I'm speaking for Barb because her computer has frozen and she's just using her phone right now.
Yes, they've been characterized this way by a number of different people. I pulled this out of a textbook of mine from years ago called Philosophy of Religion. There's so many different ways to study religion. There's sociology of religion, psychology of religion, philosophy of religion, anthropology of religion. What we've been doing last week and this week is called comparative religion, study comparing religions to each other. And basically those kinds of characterizations come from the field of study known as the philosophy of religion or the sociology of religion.
Thank you, Ken. Other questions?
Come on, Kristen, where are you when I need you, Kristen?
Yeah, come on, Kristen. And Jordan's there. Jordan's always good for a question. Jordy, is he still here?
Oh, I hadn't seen Jordan.
Jordan's down there on the bottom there. Yeah. Hey, Jordan, come on.
Hey, guys.
A question for Papa.
Oh, yeah. I had one last week about, and can you hear me all right?
Yeah, well, that's okay. It's a little muffled.
Yes.
Yeah. I was wondering, we talk about how you could be a Buddhist and a Christian, but I wonder if it would be possible comparing Islam and Christianity. And I came out, I realized Islam, really has supremacy of the Prophet Muhammad, and he's the last prophet.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if Islam and Christianity were compatible, or if Christianity places Jesus as God, right? Whereas Islam says that Jesus is just a prophet, right? So
Right.
So I guess, yeah, contrasting the idea of God in Judaism and in Islam is that God is supreme, whereas Christianity has a triune God, and
Yes.
maybe in Islam they relegate Jesus to the level of a prophet. So yeah, I don't know if there's a question there. I was just thinking about that, and if they were mutually exclusive, if you could be a Muslim and a Christian at the same time. And I think the
Yeah,
answer is no, but
yeah, you're right. That's a very good question, because there is compatibility between some of these religions, but what we just went through about the similarities and the differences, makes it clear that some of them are also incompatible. I grew up as a very conservative fundamentalist Christian, and when I was 18 years old, the Southern Baptist Convention sent me as a student missionary to the Hawaiian Islands. So in the Hawaiian Islands, one of the first families I met, I went into their home and they had a cross and a statue of Buddha, just like you see behind me there. And I was so confused by this, but they professed to be Christians and Buddhists. But by that, they meant that they were Christians who embraced the secular teachings of Buddhism, like the Eightfold Path, live right, do right, those kinds of things. So there wasn't a theology of Buddhism that would conflict with Christianity. But you're absolutely right. Christianity and Islam are totally incompatible. You just can't put them together because there are significant, irreconcilable differences in what they believe.
And I suppose it would just depend if there's that melding of religion, how dogmatic you are. And obviously, if you're more of a fundamentalist, you're going to be very rigid in your conviction. However, there may be just blending, as you say, maybe two families marry and they create their own faith and they bring those elements and combine them.
Yes, in fact, I published a book last year, and I wrote about this in the book about knowing couples who represented different faiths, and going into the home of couples in when I was a pastor in MCC, where one was Christian and one was a Jew, and seeing a Christmas tree and a Hanukkah tree side by side, and people who would celebrate the Seder and then go to Good Friday service together, and so there was each of the people was maintaining their own individual religious beliefs, but there was a tolerance and an acceptance and an understanding between them. So that can exist. And in fact, that's what we must learn, is to let religions, even if they are incompatible with each other. The history of religion is this: if you don't believe like I do, I got to kill you. That is literally the history of religion. Millions and millions of people have died because they refused to join somebody else's religion. In the 3rd century, Constantine, the Roman emperor, lined people up, and a man walked behind him with a tub of water in one hand and a sword in the other hand. This is true and literal. They walked down this line of people on their knees and gave them a chance to say, Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. If they did, then he dipped his hand in and baptized them. If they didn't, the man cut their heads off. And that happened to literally thousands and thousands of people down through history. And so I think what we must learn is that when religions are compatible, to let them be compatible. When they're not compatible, to learn to respect the differences that we have without feeling like we somehow have to change people or even eliminate them if they don't agree with us.
Yeah, and the fact that we live in the U.S. and our nation is founded on the separation of church and state, and most people perhaps don't realize how radical a concept that is. That's right. That only very recently in human history have we had the opportunity to practice our faith And at least in paper, on whether it's true in practice or not, we are free to do that without any repercussion, and we can coexist.
Yes, yes.
Well, I
You know,
think too, so many folks misunderstand what that separation of church and state means, and we really have built a story around what it means versus, again, the purpose of not allowing the state to create a state sponsored religion, to have diversity of choice, as the state religion, is choice, without repercussion. And so it's interesting that there probably could be a lot more religion inside our politics, or a lot of more faith and spirituality inside our politics,
right.
if we understood the intention was to honor all of those. And I think it's always interesting when I see the president be elected. I always listen to that prayer to say, is that person praying to all of the folks that make up, the audience there, that are allowed and should be honored and respected for all of their religious choices as part of what that president stands for. This year I was incredibly happy to hear the prayer that seemed very inclusive, and it often isn't. It often isn't.
Yeah. Yes, we in MCC, for example, we many years ago we started things like saying we pray in all your many names,
Yeah.
or in all your many sacred names.
Yeah.
There's that wonderful Mark Wren hymn entitled "Bring Many Names."
Many names.
And so that's a way of being inclusive. When we pray to try to include and not exclude. By the way, is Aaron here tonight? I can't see everybody. Is Aaron here?
Aaron.
He asked a question about
No, she was
bodhisattvas
actually
last week.
Dr. Aaron. She was actually teaching tonight, Ken.
Aaron.
Nope.
No, he's not here either.
Okay, he asked a question about bodhisattvas last week, and I promised I would answer it this week. But if he's not there, we don't need to necessarily go into that, unless somebody else wants to know about bodhisattvas.
Glenda has another question, Ken, for you.
Yes.
I just made a comment that we're speaking about the US practice of separating church and state, and yet I was watching the Senate proceedings this afternoon, and they started with a Christian prayer.
Yeah, that's what, again, Glenda, that's always been a frustration for me. I think especially growing up in MCC, where, I was taught not to tolerate other religions, but to embrace that others are on a path to the same place through their own path, through their various preachers, teachers, deities. And it's challenging. And then when you see today, if any of you watched the proceedings, there was I'm trying to think, it was a Jewish man, Ken, where he had to cover his, it was big. I didn't notice it. I was listening in the background, but whenever he sipped water, he had to cover his head with his hand. It was an observant Jew, right? And he was not allowed, he didn't have a yarmulke on. So thus he had to, just for his practice. And what I appreciated about the news channel I was watching was they said that was a big question on social media, what was going on there. And so they just explained it without judgment. They explained it without, they just explained why that occurred. And yeah, Glenda,
Yes.
I'm often the centricity of Christianity as the religion, when we know we're speaking to bodies comprised of multi-religious, just always just the hair on the back of my neck goes up.
Well,
I'm like, it's not hard to do this.
H.L. Mencken said, that if authoritarianism comes to the United States, it will come carrying a cross wrapped in a flag.
Yeah.
And, we persistently hear from the radical right that we are a Christian nation, when our founders made it very clear that we were not a Christian nation. They didn't want to be a Christian nation. They wanted to be a nation that embraced people of all faiths. And most of the founders were not Christians. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, they were deists.
Yeah.
They weren't even Christians, they were deists, you know, and they wanted to form, and because they came to this country to escape religious persecution. They didn't come here to establish more religious persecution.
Right.
You know, but there has been this movement, particularly in the last 3 decades in this country, to try to wed our politics and our religion. And at the insurrection at the Capitol on January the 6th, many people were carrying crosses. Many people were holding up Bibles. Many people were saying, you know, we're here in Jesus' name. And so they had a melding what they call patriotism and religion, and it is extremely dangerous.
Dangerous. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're coming to the bottom of the hour, my friends. Janice, you've got a question? Let's go ahead and also Diane, I see you both there. So sure,
Kind
Janice.
of in that same vein, I get it's interesting. Let's just say that most of the people who insist that we should have prayer in school, and that you know, of course, they want to have Christian prayer in school, and if I have an opportunity, I usually bring it up to them. Okay, that's fine. We should have prayer in school. Let's have Muslim prayer. Let's have Jewish prayer. Let's have, you know, everything. And just, you know, Mondays are Christian and Tuesdays are, you know, depends on who's in the school. And, you know, they go, well, no, of course they don't want that.
Right.
But yet all of the schools are full of different religions.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I don't understand that.
Yeah, it just takes a bit of thoughtfulness, Janice. And I often, when I hear it, I just bless that person and assume they don't have intention. They just have an ignorance around how their language is landing, you know. And
my sister is one of those people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes a bit of thoughtfulness. Diane, you were raising your hand. A question for Ken?
Let me get this on.
We can see you. We're good. Oh, you muted and unmuted. Diane, you were good? There you go.
Am I good now?
You're good.
Okay.
Yes.
A long time ago, I met a very learned young Hindu man, and he made the statement that to understand Christianity, you had to understand Hinduism. And I was like, whoa, how does that all happen? And I noticed on one of the slides, it talked about the anointed one. And he's mentioned that to me, that Jesus was the high anointed one, which was the closest to God there is. And he said, for example, the Brahmins, they believe that they are as close to Brahma, the God, as there is. And when Jesus said, I am the Messiah, the way it is in our Bible, he said Jesus actually was saying, I am Messiah, which is the high holy one, or the highest anointed one. And I thought that was real interesting. Deepak Chopra wrote a book called The Third Jesus, where he tries to explain a lot of that Hindu and Christianity association. And it's easy to read, but it's really fascinating.
Wow.
Now, I think because I spent my life really studying the religions, I think the more we know about other religions, the better we understand our own. Even when they are, you know, even when they are irreconcilable beliefs, you know, you know, at the end of everything we talked about last week and this week, can we say, I know exactly what I believe, and I know exactly why I believe what I believe? You know, that's a very hard thing for most of us to do.
Yeah.
But the more we know about the religions of humankind, the easier it is for us to embrace our own religion, claim and practice our own religion. Houston Smith, who is the person who knows more about world religions than any other person, he wrote dozens of books. He said that what he did was he was a Christian, an Episcopalian, and he said, that's what I am, you know, and those are my beliefs. But he said, from Hinduism, I learned this, and from Buddhism, I learned this, and from Islam, I learned this. And so I put all of those things into practice to make me a better Christian. That doesn't mean I embrace all of any of those religions, but each of them taught me something that helps make me a better Christian.
Oh, I'm gonna hold that right there, Ken. That's a beautiful way to end. And I want to thank everyone. I know these 90-minute sessions are sometimes challenging, especially for those of us on the East Coast. But I just want to thank you, Ken. How about a little bit of an unmute and applause for Ken for all this for the last 2 weeks?
Thank you.
Yay! Fantastic, Ken. And I do want to
Thank you.
remind you a couple things. I don't think we sent out the slide deck of last week with our email last week. So please make sure, if you're not sure, go ahead and annotate your name and your email address that you prefer we use in the chat box. And what we'll do is I'm gonna skinny those down and just use the ones, Ken, of the actual religions, tighten them down and PDF them, and we'll get both sets out to you this week. So we'll do that.
Good.
And then I'm gonna again remind you, we are so excited. Next week is for Black History Month. Again, some of the panelists of our week in December of Kwanzaa, they're gonna come back and share some powerful stories and teachings. It's gonna be a great week. And then Cheryl, end of the month, we're reading
Can't wait to get to heaven.
Can't Wait to Get to Heaven. And of course, you're gonna come to CLM and then Lenten Journey all through March. So God bless you all. As usual, anybody who wants to stick around for a little bit of chatting, we got a few minutes. Other than that, we will see you at Sanctuary Online next Tuesday. We're always here.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.